Have you ever wondered why, even though the stock market goes up over time, most people who invest in it still end up with worse returns than the market itself? You'd think it's simple. Buy an S&P 500 fund, sit back and collect the average return. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The average investor doesn't get the average return. Not even close. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly why that happens, using real research, a couple of relatable examples, and the psychology behind the mistakes almost everyone makes, including probably you. So give me about 10 minutes, and I'll show you the gap between what the market returns and what investors actually earn, and more importantly, how to close it. Welcome to Martech Finance, where we explain investing concepts in a simple way. But first of all, a quick disclaimer. This is not financial advice. Let's start with a number that surprises almost everyone. Over the past 20 or so years, the S&P 500 has returned somewhere around 9 to 10% annually. That's the market's return. But research firms that track actual investor behavior, most famously Dalbar in their annual quantitative analysis of investor behavior, have found something very different. The average equity fund investor earns several percentage points less than the index itself, sometimes only half of what the market delivered over the same period. Same market, same funds available to everyone, but a completely different outcome. This gap even has a name. It's called the behavior gap. And it's not caused by bad funds or hidden fees alone. It's caused by what investors do with their money once they own it.
Think of it like this. Imagine a bus that's driving to a destination at a steady, predictable pace. If you just stay on the bus, you arrive exactly when the schedule says. But most passengers don't stay on the bus. They get off when the ride feels bumpy, thinking they'll walk faster on their own. Then they get back on a few stops later, after missing the smoothest part of the journey. Then they get off again the next time it feels uncomfortable. By the time they reach the destination, they've walked more, paid more, and arrived later than if they'd simply stayed seated. That bus is the market. The passengers getting on and off, that's most investors. So, why do people keep getting off the bus? Let's go through the biggest reasons, one at a time. The first is performance chasing. This is when investors look at what's done well recently and pile into it, assuming the trend will continue. A sector or a stock has a great year, money floods in near the top, and then when it cools off, the same investors sell, often near the bottom. Morningstar has studied this extensively through what they call the Mind the Gap report, comparing the returns funds actually produce to the returns investors in those funds actually experience. Year after year, the finding is similar. Investors tend to buy after gains and sell after losses, which is the exact opposite of buy low, sell high. The second reason is market timing. We already know from research that trying to predict the best moments to buy or sell is incredibly difficult, even for professionals. But here's the part that really hurts investors. Missing just a handful of the market's best days can devastate long-term returns. And those best days are almost impossible to predict in advance because many of them happen right after the worst days, during periods of maximum fear, exactly when most people have already pulled their money out. The third reason is overtrading. Some investors treat their portfolio like a video game, constantly buying, selling, and adjusting based on news headlines or gut feelings. Every trade has a cost. Sometimes a direct commission, sometimes a hidden cost through the bid-ask spread, and often a tax cost if you're selling winners in a taxable account. Studies on individual trading accounts have consistently found that the investors who trade the most frequently earn the lowest returns, not despite their effort, but because of it. The fourth reason is home bias and lack of diversification. Many investors concentrate heavily in whatever feels familiar, their own country's market, their employer's stock, or a handful of companies they've heard of. When that concentrated bet goes wrong, there's no cushion from other assets to soften the blow.
And the fifth reason, probably the biggest one of all, is plain panic. When markets fall sharply, the instinct to protect what's left is powerful. So investors sell, lock in the loss, and then, out of fear, stay in cash, waiting for things to feel safe again. But markets don't ring a bell when they bottom. By the time it feels safe, prices have usually already recovered a large chunk of the drop, and the investor who sold has missed it.
Let's make this concrete with two fictional investors. Meet diligent Dana and reactive Rob. Both start with $50,000 in a broad market index fund. Dana sets up automatic contributions, checks her account maybe twice a year, and otherwise ignores the daily noise. Rob checks his portfolio every single day. When the market drops 15%, headlines are screaming about a recession, so Rob sells everything and moves to cash, telling himself he'll get back in once things stabilize. 6 months later, the market has recovered most of that drop and is climbing toward new highs. Rob, still nervous, waits for a pullback that never quite comes the way he expects, and finally buys back in near the top, months after Dana's portfolio had already captured the recovery. Over a decade, Dana's disciplined, boring approach outperforms Rob's active, anxious one, not because she's a better stock picker, but because she simply stayed on the bus.
Now, let's talk about the psychology, because this is really the core of the whole problem. Humans are wired with loss aversion, meaning the pain of losing money feels roughly twice as intense as the pleasure of gaining the same amount. That imbalance pushes people to sell during downturns to make the pain stop, even when logically staying invested is the better long-term move. There's also herd behavior. When everyone around you is either buying euphorically or selling in a panic, it feels safer to do what the crowd is doing, even if the crowd is historically wrong at the extremes. And there's recency bias, the tendency to assume that whatever just happened will keep happening, whether that's a crash continuing forever or a rally never ending. On top of the psychology, there's a quieter enemy: fees and costs. A 1% difference in annual fees might sound tiny, but compounded over 20 or 30 years, it can eat away a meaningful chunk of your total returns, simply because that 1% never gets the chance to compound alongside the rest of your money. Combine high fees with frequent trading and emotional decisions, and you get exactly the kind of gap Dalbar and Morningstar keep finding year after year. So, what actually works? The data consistently points toward a few boring but effective habits. Staying invested through downturns instead of jumping to cash. Using a systematic approach like dollar-cost averaging so decisions aren't driven by emotion. Choosing low-cost, diversified funds instead of chasing whatever performed best last year. And perhaps most importantly, checking your portfolio less often. Research on this is almost funny. The investors who look at their accounts the least frequently tend to make fewer emotional decisions and, as a result, often end up with better outcomes than those glued to their portfolio every day. None of this means active decision-making is always wrong, or that nobody ever successfully beats the market. Some investors and fund managers do outperform over certain periods, but the data is clear that consistently doing so is rare. And for most everyday investors, the bigger risk isn't picking the wrong stock. It's letting fear and excitement dictate when they get on and off the bus. If you found this helpful, hit the like button and consider subscribing for more videos like this. Let me know in the comments, have you ever sold in a panic and regretted it later? If you liked this video, you'll probably like this one as well. Thanks for watching and see you very soon. Bye.